Hello, everyone. Welcome to eLearnChat, where talk is knowledge. Hi, everyone. I'm Rick Zanotti, and welcome to the show. This is our first show on Ustream. We're streaming live with a new service, and if you want to watch the recordings at any time, you can. We're going to be streaming 24/7, all of the shows. So as much as we have on Ustream, we'll just start cycling through. Any live programs will automatically go live. Joining us today, replacing Dawn Mahoney for the next, at least, episode while she's here. Dawn is on business travel for the next 3 weeks, and we've got with us the inimicable.
I like that.
Inimicable. The only Kirsten Rourke we know. Hey, Kirsten, how are you?
Accept no substitutions, yes. Hi, how are you?
You are the real organic thing.
I am. They tried cloning, but it went bad. Very bad. So this is very exciting. I get to do 2 shows today.
That's right.
That's cool. Right. So we have a wonderful guest. Can you tell me about him?
We do. And our guest today is Mark Simon. Mark Simon is if I recall correctly, he's an adjunct professor at the University of Massachusetts, Boston. He teaches instructional design and multimedia. All around good guy, sharp, fun. I've had the pleasure of working with him on a couple of occasions with iSpring, where we are friends of iSpring, I guess. We work very well with them. And Mark is a very talented developer, designer, and training consultant. So, Mark, how are you today?
Great. Thank you very much, Rick. Flattering introduction, and certainly not deserving, but thank you anyway.
Yeah,
no pressure.
No pressure.
No pressure. You have to be smart and funny and charming now.
Right.
Sorry.
Mark is a good guy. So, Mark, what have you been up to?
Keeping busy, doing a lot of things with just my current client set. I wind up working quite a variety of different jobs. So I'm, doing a Captivate project one time. I'm doing an Articulate Presenter job another time. And of course, like you said, I'm affiliated with iSpring as well. And so I'm trying to keep up on all those sort of tools. And I think we'll probably talk a little bit about that this morning.
Yeah, you've done some very good reviews throughout the years of the different products, comparisons of what one can do, what one can't do. Now, I'd say the field is narrowing. What do you think? It sounds like they're all getting close in terms of capabilities.
I agree with you generally. I saw the recent upgrade from Articulate Studio, Articulate Presenter. I can never keep track of what their name is now.
2013.
2013, right. So for a long time with Articulate 09, they went long stretches without any kind of upgrade. And the recent upgrade, just after they had come out with Articulate 13, was very encouraging. And, of course, Storyline's an excellent product. Mm-hmm. So, I think they're doing a really good job on the development side, which I thought was really lacking before when I wrote my initial article. So hopefully it turns out okay. And I just started evaluating it really just last night. I finally broke down and bought my own copy. So hopefully I'll, play around with it a little bit more over the next couple of weeks, and I'm planning on coming out with a new version of my evaluation here sometime within the next month or so.
Now, last time we had you on, well, actually, no, not the last time, but a review you did not long ago, maybe last year, maybe early this year, you had mentioned that Adobe Presenter had actually started coming back up in terms of quality control. That actually surprised me because that was a product that was very buggy in the old days, but from what I'm hearing from everybody, the new Presenter is actually not too bad.
Yeah, it was a big surprise for me too, Rick. So what I evaluated was Adobe Presenter 9, and I actually met with the Adobe development team to discuss it because I've just written my notes as I was going through it. I had no intention of actually publishing an article for it. But the pleasant surprise with it is when you publish, there's no checkbox there for HTML5, which of course is the big hot thing now because so many people are running lessons on mobile devices. But they have their own player. And even though they're not really waving that flag about HTML5 and they don't really have it visible within the publish dialog, it behaved itself very well, and better even than Articulate Presenter 13. So, yeah, they're doing pretty well. And they just upgraded to Adobe Presenter 10, which I just downloaded again last night. So they're coming along.
So can I jump in with a question quick?
Sure.
So I know that we have a pretty diverse audience, but not everybody is in the field. So your main focus, you said earlier, was instructional design?
Yes, that's correct.
So how would you describe that to people? How would you describe the field of instructional design is?
Well, it was easier to define, I'll say this, about 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. Nowadays, it's so challenging because so many people are approaching all of their learning from different angles. So I think an instructional designer today basically builds instructional materials, and that's probably the broad sweep that you can do. But there's so many different just blended solutions, and I'm not just talking about formal training. I'm talking about performance support and things like that, that really an instructional designer needs to know all of those different elements to kind of put themselves into the seat or shoes of an end learner, and to try to come up with solutions that are going to work for that particular audience.
So would you say that the key thing someone going into the field needs is kind of the ability to be flexible?
Yes,
okay.
Absolutely. Even if they have e-learning capability, and that's a big hot thing and an important element in almost every sort of solution, you just can't assume that the E in e-learning stands for everything,
yes.
Which is a pretty common mistake. There's still a lot to be said for face-to-face. There's still a lot to be said for performance support and the behind-the-scenes teaching somebody how to fish instead of giving them the fish. Mm-hmm. And so I think all of those things have to be considered as you're trying to, come up with that learning solution for the end learner.
Do you have a set process when you start building your learning for the first time of the sort of questions you ask, or is it a different process depending on different clients?
Yeah, that's a great question, Kirsten. I don't think I've got really a set of process necessarily, but the one focus to me is always on the learner, and I try to drill down as much as I can on, okay, who is this audience and who are we designing this for? Because depending on where they are, what they have available to them, if it's a engineering audience, that's one thing. If it's a sales audience, it's a very different thing. You have to take all of those things into account. So I think if you're approaching this with some sort of strategic discussion up front and trying to plan, really the easiest thing to do is to focus on the learner and then kind of spin off from there on all the different options that you might have available to you.
I remember when I studied journalism in high school and in college, the one thing that they talked about a lot was who, what, when, where, why, and how. And that actually applies pretty well to instructional design, too.
Yep. I love that. That's actually a great approach. It's the old journalism part that still, when you read newspapers or magazines, it's that lead paragraph, and it's the goal of every journalist to try to get that up front right away. So that's actually a great strategy. I like that. I wish I had that answer, Rick.
How do you work with getting... Oh, sorry.
No, I was only kidding around. I was just saying that if I had a do-over, I'd probably use Rick's answer and not my answer. But I actually think both of them might work.
Well, I think both answers definitely are good. So here's my next question for you. One of the challenges with e-learning for especially newer folks is accommodating the sort of learner goals if they're different from the business goals. What's your advice on that?
Yeah, I mean, I put business goals first as a rule. Mm-hmm. I think as the worst thing is having a former instructor getting in because the instructor kind of like knows the flow that they want to teach and the flow that will work best for them. And really, I think the instructor or the instructional designer in this case is third on that chain. You really have to recognize business goals. Maybe primarily, and then address again the audience, the learner, number two. And I found it really interesting reading a Bob Mosier article. This is several months ago in CLO magazine, And he was talking about the SME, and all of us know the SME. The SME has all that expertise, and that's the person that we get the information from. But he planted the seed that now it's the BME, or the business matter expert, that really has to be brought into the equation. And I thought that was kind of deep. I haven't heard a whole lot since then, but I thought, in my experiences, more and more there's a business analyst somewhere in the organization, and I think that's a person that needs to come into the conversations when you're trying to evaluate what to teach, how to teach it, and what the business goals are.
Yeah, that's excellent. Yes, I mean, SME, subject matter expert, is sort of ubiquitous. It's everywhere. But yeah, I hadn't thought of it and heard of bringing in a BME, but that makes perfect sense. Because without the business focus, you're not going to get the training to people anyway.
Well, also what happens, and this is the big problem with subject matter experts, they often know their specific area, but they don't necessarily know how it ties into the whole. Some of them do, some don't. Which is, to Mark's point, when you have the business analyst, their job's to be much more aware of the whole, how things integrate together. Absolutely.
Right, and their meetings and their discussions take place with really the organizational leaders there. The SME oftentimes knows the product if you're trying to build training for a product, or they'll know, little, like you said, Rick, little pieces of the puzzle and not just really the overall objective of the puzzle.
So when someone's starting out, I end up bringing this up in almost everyone, sorry, Rick, but what are your thoughts on storyboarding?
I'm against it.
Okay.
Okay, so, first of all, I fully recognize that failing to plan is planning to fail, or whatever the phrase is. And I know storyboarding, is a big piece of that. Here's the thing. I subscribe a lot more to the Michael Allen, SAM, rapid prototyping, or whatever else that you want to call it. I believe he's got a simulation. What does SAM stand for anyway? I always forget what his model stands for. But
yeah, me too.
It's a rapid prototyping sort of model. And, I've been working a lot with PowerPoint-based tools for a while. And the thing that strikes me is that if you have a PowerPoint-based tool, and it's a little different if you were starting from a blank sheet of paper, but if you have a PowerPoint-based tool anyway, it takes very little just to click a button, the magic publish button, and to come up with that prototype, in essence, that's more than just it's more than a storyboard. It kind of shows the controls and so on and so forth. I have a brief story about a client I worked with, a true story, a medical device company here in the Boston area, and they were in a hurry to try to get an e-learning module done. They had all kinds of PowerPoint all set. The project was going to be done in Adobe Studio 9, I believe at the time, and they decided to go through the storyboarding stage. So what they did is they went through the review, 2 reviews of the outline of the training, okay? And if you know reviews are one thing that really bogs down the process of development, because you go and send your outline out for review, or whatever you have, you're sending something out for review. It sits on the desk for a little while, and then they finally get to it, and then 3 days later they return it, and then you have to have some discussion. Okay, so they went through those 2 steps for the outline stage, and I understand that, but then they went through a storyboarding stage. And the storyboarding stage had 2 other reviews. The worst news of all was when they finally came out with the first draft of the e-learning, they still got back comments that were basically at level 1, because people couldn't visualize from the storyboard what it was really going to look like in e-learning format. So I'm generally, I try to go away from storyboarding. I do it if my client asks me to do it, but yeah, I think we're moving away from it, and I hear more and more people kind of getting away from that formal model, and a lengthy analysis stage, and trying to move into the rapid prototyping stage.
I think one thing we have to define is storyboarding can sometimes be nothing more than a script. It could also be a visual layout, which again then doubles the cost, because now you're doing a visual layout storyboard, which means you're doing extra graphics or layout before they've even approved anything. The other example is doing a script where now you're writing it, but they have a hard time imagining what you're writing. It's always been the bane of, I think, everybody's existence to come up with something that's a good middle ground that doesn't require 3,000 reviews. Unless, again, of course, if you're doing compliance training, then you have 8,000 reviews. But that's a whole different issue, because that you're dealing with legal and nobody agrees on what the legal definitions are or what the requirements are. And you could have 5 different people watching something and they'll have a totally different opinion. So, those are the tough parts about storyboarding. We use one tool. I don't know if you guys have ever seen this, Storyboard Quick. And we don't use it often, but it allows you to quickly mock up a scene where you have some furniture, you've got some people, and it's not meant to be a final graphic thing. It's just a mock-up. But it gives people an idea of kind of where you're going. It's used more in video, but it works well in an e-learning environment. Then again, the problem is when you give people a Storyboard Quick or the final customer, they go, I don't like the graphics. No. This is a mock-up.
Yes.
I don't like the graphics. I know, but it's a mock-up. I don't like the graphics. Oh.
Right.
And so, that can drive you insane too, because then you have to explain at least 100 times, no, these are not the real graphics. These are mock-ups. What's a mock-up? Ah, okay. So you go through all sorts of fun little things like that sometimes.
You're kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Yeah.
Because if you put in mock-up graphics, sometimes people get hung up on those, like you were saying. And if you put in, more full graphics, then sometimes people get hung up on those. So it's almost like there's this dance you have to do every time.
Yeah, and if you put in stick figures, then they go, I don't like the Neolithic approach. Well, no, we're not trying to do a Neolithic approach.
Right. But the SAM model encourages you to do that.
Yes.
I'm sure you must realize that the SAM model basically says don't be afraid to distribute something before it's done, because basically giving them a little bit of a better idea up front sometimes helps, because there are little things that are caught, like, oh, I didn't realize we could put attachments into this e-learning thing. Is that what that little thing in the upper right is for? And again, if you use this is one reason why I like PowerPoint-based tools. If you're using a PowerPoint-based tool and then you just, again, click the publish button, even though things are a little bit rough and maybe you don't have narration, maybe you don't have final graphics in there, you give them the e-learning skin plus the lesson, and they'll get an idea about flow, and I just think it gets a step closer than a storyboard would.
Now, I agree. PowerPoint, in essence, is like a great storyboarding tool. The only issue with PowerPoint that we have is when you put the narration part of it, usually you do it in notes. When you print the notes, they look pretty crummy. The voiceover people hate reading them because it's usually full screen. It doesn't format very well. What do you usually do when it comes to narration?
Yeah, so I so far do my very best to outsource it. Okay. I have a golden voice, of course, maybe not like yours, Rick, but no, I do my own audio and narration, but I would rather outsource it. I agree with you on the notes area. Generally speaking, it's much more difficult, I think, for a narrator to read, but I don't know. I generally try to format the notes area as much as possible to make it easier to read, and that's about as far as I've gone so far. So I haven't gone to a step of actually working hand in hand with having the notes area be the narration, and then also keeping an MS Word file or something else like that next to it that basically is easier to do the narration with.
In fact, you have, if I recall correctly, you have a niece. Is it a niece who does voiceover?
I do, yes.
This is your time to plug her.
NatalieBayne.com.
What's her name?
Yeah, she's wonderful. Natalie Bayne, BAIN. .com, and she's got her own website, and she's actually doing terrific, just doing this on her own. She was a professional actress for a while. She's still a member of the Screen Actors Guild. I'm not an expert in this area, but it's something along that line. And she has a fabulous voice. She's a terrific singer if you want to have singing on your tape, or she does nice British accents and things like that. So, yeah, that's my go-to person for my narration.
Yeah.
So we have a comment from the chat pod, which I'm loving, which is graphics takes their minds off of complaining about the font. And it's completely and 100% true. Yes, it does.
I love it. Yeah. No. Well, and I'll take the comment on the font, and pretty much then I'll do whatever I think is best. But, when you get those sort of comments, you always have that dilemma about, okay, who's giving this comment, and really, is it essential to the lesson? Mm-hmm. But yeah, you do get the font issues for sure.
Now, Kirsten, just so you know, on this Ustream, you could do your chatting through Twitter.
Oh, okay.
With the hashtag RELATECASTS, it'll automatically create that, and then you can tweet through that. That's another thing you can do on this.
Ooh, very cool.
Nice feature.
I like it. Yeah, this is awesome. I have to say, I'm sorry to derail from the interview for a quick second, but I'm so glad JustinTV went feet up. I am. I am just so glad. It's like, yay, ding dong, the witch is dead. Woohoo!
Well, you know what's funny? You know why they probably went dead? They sold, JustinTV bought Twitch, which was a gaming channel. And they sold it to Google last week or the week before for almost $1 billion. And I'm pretty sure part of that arrangement was get rid of Justin.tv because we don't need it anymore because we have YouTube Live. And they went, sure, $1 billion, you got it.
Yeah.
And because it just literally overnight just said, bye, we're gone.
Yeah.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's an interesting world sometimes. But it was a good thing, for us, because we were getting kind of tired of Justin having really bad lag times and other issues.
And hideous ads that went on forever, yes.
Yeah, we went pro, so we shouldn't get too many ads. I don't know how many ads we're going to get, but there are some ads after we reach a certain level. But I think we'll be okay for a while.
Question, is it RelateCast or RelateCasts is the hashtag? Casts, okay. All right, so you're a professor as well, yes?
Yes, I am. Well, I'm an adjunct professor. I'm not sure if that's
but that's
a real
professor. No, one of my friends is an adjunct. Believe me, I'm not going to do the adjuncts or lesser thing. No. No, you're a professor, and you're an adjunct professor, yes. So what do you do?
So I teach a class at UMass Boston in their Instructional Design graduate program. Coincidentally, it's the program that I went through myself several years ago for my master's degree in instructional design. I've taught several courses there. Right now I'm focusing on a blended learning course. It's called Selection and Evaluation of Instructional Media. So the focus is on basically taking a look at all the different options that you have, from e-learning to mobile learning to classroom, on-the-job training, performance support. We spend a week going through basically all of those different options that instructional designers have, and we drill in a little bit deeper to take a look at these things. And we have all the students are reading current events and basically having discussions on all those things. And in the end, we kind of try to tie it all together. Like, what are the strengths, what are the weaknesses of all these, and when would you use this one versus that one? So.
Mark, I have a theory about college professors. So this should be a rule. Now, tell me what you think of this.
I was thinking the same thing, Kirsten.
I think all college professors should not allow to be a college professor until they're minimum 40 or 45, and they've actually worked in the industry. And then they can actually impart useful knowledge, because many professors have no clue what the real world is about.
I just need to put a little ding, and this is the part of the show where we offend some group of people. We do it every show.
Yeah, we actually do it on immediate chat every show, but I think we should extend that a bit to every show we do.
Oh, that's true. It's actually you and my show, the next one, that we offend somebody every time. So, ding, there we go. Young professors.
But I mean, think about it. Wouldn't that make sense? Because a lot of them, they have no real experience. In fact, most people go and get their master's immediately after a bachelor's, which is not what the master's was supposed to be. It was supposed to be after 2 to 4 years of actual real experience, then you go and get better at it.
I think more and more universities are doing that for the master's degree programs, at least. I agree with you, generally speaking. I think you find the younger professors in the undergraduate programs, where they're just supposed to teach the academic portion of it and, maybe the theory of it. But, way back when it started, locally here with Northeastern University, where when you went through their technical writing program, for an example, I knew a couple of people that attended there. All of the professors came from industry, and all the professors had hands-on experience, and so they weren't just professors. They were out there in the workforce. And I think more and more programs are going like that. And I know the instructional design program at UMass Boston, our instructors all are basically hands-on people.
Mm-hmm.
And I shouldn't give the age bracket, I guess, but I believe they're all 45 or older. Certainly, mostly.
And the comment from the chat pod is, well, professors should be learners in the first place.
That too.
Yes.
I like that.
But
Totally
actually,
agree.
I'll correct that. Everyone should be a learner, period.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Professors should just be better at learning and imparting knowledge. After, of course, they've got some experience to impart.
Yep.
So this the program that you do, is there a usability testing part, or is that a different discipline piece?
Yeah. The UI piece is different. We don't have a UI piece to it. UI, it's an intriguing part of, I guess, a lot of our lives, but I think it's more in the technology side. And, not all instructors, not everybody comes through the instructional design program work with technology. And so, I'm not sure how much the UI course would help you. If you're doing web design, certainly it's going to help you, and to have an awareness of what good design is versus bad. But yeah, so right now, at least the instructional design program doesn't have that element in it.
Now, Mark, from an instructional design point of view, what the one I think problem most instructionals have, not designers have, not all of them, and that is the ability to call out something. In other words, how do you train somebody to call out interactions, to think creatively? The authoring tool helps, but how do you get people to think about interactions, of things to make it a little bit more engaging, or also how to call out graphics, for example, how to call out the imagery that has some context with what you're trying to teach?
Sure. So if you're talking about actually the instructional design and the writing of it, there's so many different options now. If I'm understanding you correctly, maybe this is a two-part thing, but one is the interaction and when to put in an interaction,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like anything else. Like you want to make it, when the learner needs it, but don't overdo it. Right? So you don't want it on every single slide, like everything to kind of be jumping up and down. They've already done studies where too many animations and too much movement
Mm-hmm.
is actually counterproductive for learning and comprehension.
Yep.
So it's okay to have some element of reading on the part of somebody that's going through and taking a course. So I use a guideline of every 4 to 5 slides, or when in my gut I feel it,
Mm-hmm.
to put in an interaction. And then the element to actually do that, there's so many other choices now. So I try to do it without being too sparkly. Is that a word?
That's a good word.
Oh, I like that.
So
I like that.
yeah, I use transparency a lot. Like I'll do a little mass transparency over a graphic image if it's a software screen or something like that, and I can do a little knockout of the section that I'm discussing. But then down the road, I'll also use it. If it has to have some more description, that I don't want to just come across with the narration, I'll put the little square box or rounded rectangle box with a little arrow, and put that information there if it's important information for the learner to take into account for a particular section.
So what sort of length, when you're having people do basic skills training in sort of a corporate setting, if they're building that, what sort of length of modules do you think what do you have your students sort of target? Is there a length that is specific, or is it always dependent on the material?
I haven't done a lot of recent research. I know that it became less and less and less, and so my guideline right now is 20 to 30 minutes per module at the max, and basically shorter is good, because you have to have that little breaking point. Now, there's many ways to make a breaking point, and not just to say, okay, this is module 1 and this is module 2. So if you can break it enough within a module, you can go beyond, I think, that 20 to 30 minute. But when you get into a lesson that goes longer and longer, like let's say, okay, I have 2 hours worth of material, I have 4 hours worth of material, you have to break it up sometimes just because of performance. If it's traveling through the internet pipe, you're just asking for trouble when you make it one giant 4-hour lesson, even if you've got breaks within it. So, again, I try to keep 20 to 30 minutes as my general guideline.
Yeah, Rick, does that sound familiar? Suddenly 4 hours worth of material?
Yeah, it's pretty familiar. we see it a lot.
Yeah.
But and unfortunately, and a lot of people like to make it one lesson out of all that, and it's like no.
Right.
And they go, well, don't you have bookmarking? No.
Yeah.
No.
Right.
No. Bookmarking is not my favorite thing because when you get back in, you're totally out of context usually.
Yes. Right.
It's a great excuse for somebody who's multitasking and can't seem to focus for 15 minutes. The problem is when you get back into bookmarking, now you're in the situation where, what if you're in the middle of an interaction? Great. You have no idea where you started, where you were.
Yeah.
It doesn't work well. And in a lot of the authoring tools, if you're branching somewhere, good luck trying to find it exactly where you were as you go back.
Right.
Yeah.
It's tricky. It's really tricky. I actually try to dissuade people from bookmarking almost every time. I'm successful about 50%.
Right. Yeah, and I think the other element that's coming into play a lot lately is video.
Yeah.
It's a great little, okay, let's take a break now and let's watch a video. I mean, they used to do it, not to date myself, but I am over 45. But we used to have movies in our classrooms, right? And
yes.
so it's been done forever. So a teacher would lecture for maybe, I don't know, an hour, and then say, okay, let's watch a video, or back in the day, let's watch a movie. And that broke it up. And then all of a sudden, you went into a different sort of realm. And I think we're doing more of that now. And I see more and more people doing it effectively, of interspersing at least a brief video. It doesn't have to be long. It could be 2 minutes. It could be 3 minutes. Somewhere 2 to 5 minutes, a little video that you're going to put in the middle that kind of breaks things up. And again, it's one of those divider sort of things that kind of like breaks up a lengthy sort of lesson.
Yeah, even some music or something to kind of give a little bit of a breakup. But Mark, going back to videos, I remember when I was a kid, we did the same thing, and it was fun watching the person doing this.
Especially if it was like a monkey.
We're talking
that was
pre-8 millimeter.
You had the little animals?
We had the little animals, yes.
Yeah, you realize that half the people who watch this have no idea what you're talking about.
That's correct. And the other half wouldn't have an idea anyway. They don't remember anymore. So.
I think the younger half has already tuned out.
That's right. They've
wrong.
Yeah. Like it's
long
three
ago
old people talking. We're done. Yeah.
We had some. Go ahead.
Sorry. Speaking of video, how much do you think, when folks are coming into the business, do they need to start learning essentially video techniques and sort of the movie making, screenwriting concept for being able to put videos in? Or is that something they should always just outsource and go to a specialist?
No, I would do the opposite, and I would try to avoid going out to, I wouldn't avoid going out to a specialist, but I think more and more you can do some rudimentary videos depending on your requirements on your own. So I would have a goal of that first, and certainly to have the skills, absolutely, just for the starting point. And honestly, I think most of the younger generation has that skill just because of the world that they grew up with. So I think it's mostly us old folks that kind of like, if we haven't had the video piece as part of our background, that we need to start picking up on it and know the difference between an MP4 file and a WMV file and all the other considerations as you're putting video into your lessons. But I think there's a lot that can be done with again, do it yourself in certain situations. And so I wouldn't automatically just go out to professionals on that.
And with that, you know what? We are at the end of our time. We're at about 38 minutes of show. Mark, it goes fast.
Certainly does.
So we need to have you back again when you finish your reviews of the product.
Yes.
We'd love to have you come back and share some of the reviews and your findings, and we can talk about the different things. I know even, all the tools are updating and doing a lot better job nowadays in just about every way. But it's still kind of an interesting market. It's a market not geared towards professional developers anymore, but rather the mid-level to low-level developers.
Yep,
So it's kind of
absolutely.
interesting.
You're finding sales doing a lot of PowerPoint-based, quick overviews with kind of rudimentary sort of audio on top of it. HR is getting involved a lot now too, just to do, the basic sort of things. So yeah, it's going outside the training department quite a bit.
Yep, that's true. Well, Mark, is always a pleasure. Kirsten, what can I say? The inimitable you. Hey, we should make a movie, Inimitable You. Sort of like Despicable
Sounds
Me.
good. I would. Can I cast the body double?
Sure. Okay, I have
Okay.
to now. I have to ask, who would the body double be?
I don't know. Off the top of my head, why don't we say Angelina Jolie?
I knew she was going to say that. I
That's
was
exactly what I was
convinced you
going
would
to
say
guess.
Jolie. I don't
Anyway.
know why.
I don't know. I'm just thinking of like.
I don't know. Have you
if
seen
I
her
could
lately?
Wave a magic wand.
Not looking
and,
so
and
good.
steal someone else's body.
By the way, not
There we
looking
go.
so good lately.
Oh, Angelina.
Oh, I don't.
I don't. Huh?
Pre-Tomb Raider.
Pre-Tomb Raider, Clark said.
Oh, yeah. Tomb Raider would be. The Tomb Raider bod. That would be awesome. I would take that. There we go. So now we know. We need to find a stunt double that looks like that,
stunt
and then
double.
just give her my hair.
You got it. All
Yeah,
right,
it's
everyone.
interesting.
Well,
The
thanks.
chat pod has this delay on it, and you can't post things more than every 8 seconds. So it's a slightly different experience than what we had before.
Interesting. You
But
really
it's good.
there's-
We got people in the chat pod. Thank you for coming.
Really,
awesome.
there's a limit to how much you can post, or how fast?
No,
you can-
there's a limit to how fast.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay, I
How
wonder if we
fast. Once
could-
you put
maybe
in
there's a-
something, there's a little thing that says you got to wait 8 seconds.
Let me
so
check. That may-
it stops people from getting into pissing contests.
Yeah, let me check. There may be
know?
a setting for that too. We could make it a little shorter.
Okay. Well, it's not hurting anything. It's just Leva mentioned it, and I noticed it too. It's like you post something and then you got to wait a couple seconds.
Yep.
So.
Okay.
There
Well,
we
anyway,
go.
we're gonna.
But thank
we're
you
gonna-
so much. This was fun.
Yeah, and we will see you guys next week. And remember, you can watch these shows anytime you want, either on Vimeo or just go live, and you can watch pre and post shows. Have a good one, everyone. Thanks, Mark. Bye bye.
All right.
All
Bye,
right.
everybody. Thanks for
folks.
coming.